The moment Sarah saw him hand the bouquet to their waitress with that genuine, effortless smile, something inside her chest cracked open in a way she didn't know was possible. Not the smaller bouquet, no. He gave the elderly woman the nicer one, the one with the soft pink peonies that probably cost twice as much as the roses he'd brought for their first date. And in that single gesture, in that unrehearsed moment of pure human kindness, Sarah understood with crystalline clarity that she was looking at the man she would marry. But what she didn't know yet was that this moment would save her from a darkness she'd been carrying, alone for far too long, and that his kindness would teach her how to be kind to herself again. Sarah had almost canceled their date that evening. She'd been staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror for 20 minutes, picking apart every flaw, every imperfection, drowning in the familiar voice that told her she wasn't enough. At 28, she'd survived a relationship that had slowly, methodically dismantled her self-worth brick by brick. Her ex-fiancé had been a master of subtle cruelty, the kind that left no visible bruises but carved deep canyons into her soul. He'd criticized the way she laughed too loudly, dressed too plainly, thought too simply. For 3 years, she'd shrunk herself smaller and smaller, trying to fit into the impossible shape he demanded. When she finally found the courage to leave 6 months ago, she thought she'd be free. Instead, she discovered that his voice had moved inside her head, becoming her own inner critic, more vicious than he'd ever been. If you believe in second chances, in the healing power of unexpected kindness, in love that arrives when you've almost given up, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel. Your support means everything, and your story matters too. Drop a comment telling us about a moment when someone's kindness changed your perspective. Now let's continue with Sarah's story. The dating app had been her sister's idea, a gentle push back into the world of possibility. Sarah had swiped through dozens of profiles with detached numbness until she saw Marcus. His profile wasn't flashy or carefully curated, just honest photos showing a real smile that reached his eyes, a bio that mentioned his work as a middle school science teacher, and his weekend volunteer work at an animal shelter. When he messaged her, he didn't open with some clever line. He simply asked about the book she was reading in one of her photos, and they'd spent 2 hours messaging about literature, childhood dreams, and the strange comfort of rainy Sundays. But sitting across from him now at this small Italian restaurant tucked away on a quiet street, Sarah felt the familiar panic rising. She'd been so nervous she'd arrived 15 minutes early, spending the time in her car practicing breathing exercises, reminding herself that she deserved to be here, that she was worthy of someone's time and attention. Marcus had arrived exactly on time, carrying flowers and wearing that same genuine smile from his photos. The roses were beautiful, sunset-colored and fragrant, and when he handed them to her, he'd said something that caught her off guard. He told her he'd brought them because he wanted her to know he was taking her seriously, but that she shouldn't feel any pressure tonight was just about 2 people sharing a meal, and maybe a few laughs. The evening had unfolded with surprising ease. Marcus was funny without trying too hard, asked questions that showed he actually listened to her answers, and shared stories from his classroom that revealed a man who genuinely cared about making the world a little better. But Sarah had been on good first dates before. She'd learned that charm could be a mask, that attentiveness could be a manipulation tactic, that kindness could be a performance. She'd built walls so high that she watched their interaction from a guarded distance, waiting for the moment when his real self would emerge, when the criticism would begin, when she'd realize this was all too good to be true. Then their waitress approached with their entries, and everything shifted. The woman was in her late 60s, maybe early 70s, with silver hair pulled back in, a neat bun, and eyes that held the wariness of someone who'd spent decades on her feet. Her name tag read Margaret, and there was something fragile about her smile, something that spoke of recent grief or loss. She set down their plates with hands that trembled slightly, apologizing when a fork slipped from her grasp. Marcus immediately bent to retrieve it, waving away her concern with easy grace. As Margaret turned to leave, he called her back gently. What happened next unfolded like a scene from a movie Sarah would have thought too sentimental to be real. Marcus reached under the table and pulled out another bouquet, this one more elaborate than the roses he'd given Sarah. He stood up, held it out to Margaret, and spoke words that Sarah would replay in her mind thousands of times in the years to come. He told Margaret that he'd noticed she seemed like she might be having a hard day, that he hoped these flowers might bring a little brightness to whatever she was going through, and that he wanted her to know her service and her presence mattered. He said it all without performance, without expectation of recognition or praise, just human to human, heart to heart. Margaret's eyes filled with tears immediately. Her hands flew to her mouth, and for a moment she couldn't speak. When she finally found words, they tumbled out in a rush of gratitude and grief. Her husband had passed away 2 weeks ago, she told them. They'd been married for 47 years. Today was her first day back at work, because she couldn't bear to sit alone in their empty house anymore. No one had given her flowers since the funeral. No one had really seen her since she'd come back. She was just the waitress bringing food to tables, invisible in her grief. Marcus hugged her then, this stranger who'd become suddenly human, suddenly seen. And Sarah watched this man, this teacher who'd probably spent his modest paycheck on flowers for a woman he'd never met, holding a grieving widow in the middle of a busy restaurant. And she felt something inside her begin to heal. Not all at once, healing never works that way. But a crack appeared in the wall she'd built, letting in a sliver of light. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of deeper conversation. Sarah found herself telling Marcus things she'd planned to keep hidden for months, maybe forever. She told him about her ex, about the criticism and the slow erosion of her self-worth. About the voice in her head that still told her she was too much and not enough all at once. And Marcus listened without trying to fix her, without minimizing her pain, without suggesting she should be over it by now. He just listened, and then he shared his own story of heartbreak and recovery, of learning that kindness toward others begins with kindness toward ourselves. Before they left, Margaret came back to their table with a dessert she said was on the house, but really it was just an excuse to thank Marcus again and to tell them both that they'd given her something to hold on to on a day when she'd forgotten why she was still standing. She told them she saw something special between them, something rare and real. Walking Sarah to her car later that night, Marcus didn't try to kiss her. He just held her hand and told her he'd really like to see her again if she was interested, that he understood if she needed time, that he wasn't going anywhere. And Sarah, who'd spent 6 months believing she was too broken for love, felt something shift inside her chest, felt hope bloom in places she'd thought had died. If this story touched your heart, if you believe in the kind of love that heals rather than harms, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to believe in good men and second chances and the power of simple kindness. Your engagement helps us continue sharing stories that matter. 3 years later, Sarah would walk down an aisle carrying peonies, the same flowers Marcus had given to Margaret that night. Margaret would be there too, sitting in the front row next to Sarah's family, wearing a dress the color of sunset roses. And when the officiant would ask if anyone knew why these two should not be joined in marriage, Marcus would joke that the only objection might come from their waitress, who'd already claimed she'd seen it first. Before we end, please take a moment to comment below. Have you ever witnessed an act of kindness that changed how you saw someone? Share your story with us. But on that first night, standing in the parking lot, under a sky full of stars, Sarah simply squeezed Marcus's hand and said yes, she'd very much like to see him again. And she knew, with a certainty that transcended logic or caution, that she was holding the hand of the man who would teach her that love doesn't have to hurt, that kindness isn't a performance, and that she'd been worthy of flowers all along. She just needed someone brave enough to bring flowers for everyone else too, someone who understood that how we treat strangers in their grief reveals everything about how we'll treat the ones we love in their vulnerability. In the reflection of his kindness to a heartbroken waitress, Sarah finally saw herself as deserving of the same gentle care, and that changed everything.